Iran threatens retaliation after 2 blasts killed more than 80 people during commemorations for an assassinated general. It's said to be the worst attack since the 1979 revolution. So how will Tehran react? And is there a risk of escalation in the region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. It is one of the worst attacks to hit Iran in decades. More than 80 people were killed in the southeastern city of Kerman on Wednesday when 2 explosives went off during a crowded procession. The timing of the attack is significant. It happened during a ceremony marking 4 years since the U.S. assassinated one of Iran's top generals, Generals Soleimani. The attack is adding yet another layer of tension in the region. There's Israel's war on Gaza, this week's assassination of a Hamas commander in Lebanon, and now this attack in Iran. So is there a connection, and will these suspicions of different governments and armed groups escalate the violence? We'll get to those questions in a moment, but first, this report from Katia Lopez-Hodoyan.
The 2 bombs exploded during a crowded procession marking 4 years since the U.S. assassination of Iran's top military commander, Qasem Soleimani, who, up until his death, was among the most powerful men in Iran. Soleimani led Iran's Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, which handles overseas operations, including providing weapons, money, and logistical support to armed groups in the region, including Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran immediately blamed Israel for the attack.
I warn the Zionist regime, without a doubt you will pay the price for this crime. These crimes you've committed, you will deeply regret.
The U.S. State Department denies the accusations and points to a lack of evidence.
The United States was not involved in any way, and any suggestion to the contrary is ridiculous. And number 2, we have no reason to believe that Israel was involved in this explosion.
In recent years, armed groups, including ISIL, have carried out attacks against civilians and security forces in Iran. In 2017, 12 people were killed when ISIL targeted Iran's parliament building and the tomb of the republic's revolutionary founder. The attack comes at a time of high tensions in the region. Israel has not let up in its war on Gaza. And in Lebanon's capital, the second most powerful commander of Hamas was assassinated on Tuesday in an apparent Israeli strike.
The assassination of one of Hamas's top leaders in Lebanon is yet another factor that could indeed escalate the conflict in Gaza.
And now, this latest attack in Iran risks escalating an already fragile situation in the region that's been on edge for months. Katia Lopez-Hodoyan, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. In Tehran is Hassan Ahmadian, Professor of Middle East Studies at the University of Tehran. In Berlin, Ali Fatullah Nejad, founder and director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order. And in Bethlehem, Ayman Jawed Al-Tamimi, research fellow at the Middle East Forum with a special expertise on ISIL. A very warm welcome to all of you. Mr. Ahmadian, from what we know about this attack so far, who operates in this manner? 2 bombings in quick succession targeting civilians.
Now, there hasn't been any official talk on this or any official announcement. Obviously, there is investigation ongoing to figure out who and how it was pulled off. But so far, we don't have any official announcement on the issue. But of course, Iran's regional policy and posture has put it in recent decades at loggerheads with 2 prime suspects in the eyes of Iranians. Those are ISIS and its sister organizations and the Israelis and their backers. These are the 2 prime suspects as per Iranian analysis coming out in different outlets. And I think because these are the two parties that have, it seems, inherent interest at this point to hit Iran with and its internal security, they are being, taken as the most probable, parties that have pulled this off.
Okay, Mr. Fathullah Nejad, we are hearing from Iranian leaders. They're not saying exactly who they think it is, but they have said things like the head of the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force has said that they blame the Zionist regime and its ally, the United States, that they're looking towards Israel and the United States. But if we look at, again, at how this attack has been carried out, it doesn't carry the hallmarks of previous attacks by Israel, does it?
That's correct, actually, because I think, first of all, we should be extremely cautious about the kind of official narrative that we're hearing from the Islamic Republic and also state media in Iran, who are blaming the usual suspects, Israel and also the United States, by the way. But if you look at past Israeli, attacks in Iran, they were very clearly targeting the regime and its infrastructure, be it military or nuclear. And plus, there is also, the realization in Israel that there is a wide gulf between state and society in Iran. And I think there is no appetite to execute such an operation against civilians in Iran that may lead to Iranian society turning against Israel. So I think, the probability that Israel was behind this attack is quite low.
Yeah, and Mr. Al-Tamimi, I know that you also think that the probability of Israel carrying out this attack is low. Again, when you look at where the bombs were placed, from what we know so far about where the bombs were placed, not near the ceremony itself that was, we believe, attended by senior regime officials, but, where ordinary people who do support the regime, but ordinary people were. What can we surmise from this that the target, wasn't senior Iranian regime officials?
Well, I couldn't speculate on the precise target, but in general, if you take it from the Islamic State's standpoint, then any Iranian civilian, doesn't matter if it works for the government or not, any Iranian civilian who is Shia, of the Shi'i faith, is considered what they call a Rafidite and an apostate from Islam, and therefore worthy of being targeted in the group's eyes. And this matches with past attacks they've carried out in Iran. For instance, in the last one they claimed actually was in October of 2022. And that wasn't targeting senior officials necessarily of the Iranian government. It wasn't targeted in that way. It was just aimed at inflicting mass casualties among ordinary people, but just simply for being Shia. And this is in the city of Shiraz. And one thing I actually would add is that we can't. We're waiting for some kind of statement if it is the Islamic State to see if they actually say anything about this.
Yeah,
it is.
And you are an expert on ISIL. I'm sorry to interrupt, but given you are an expert on ISIL, doesn't the group usually take responsibility pretty quickly when it does carry out attacks?
Well, this is what I was going to say about this now, actually, that they don't always claim every attack they do around the world. And that could be for a variety of reasons, because I actually wanted to point out that there was an attack in Shiraz as well in August of last year, and the Iranians arrested the operative and sentenced him to, sentenced him to death, as I recall, but identified him as a member of the Islamic State. He was originally from Tajikistan. But the Islamic State actually never claimed that attack. I mean, it could be that the Islamic State did the attack and then doesn't claim it because it wants to, say, leave doubt and have Iran point fingers at other actors and contribute, I think, to this wider sense of instability and chaos that they could exploit.
All right, Mr. Ahmadiyyan, tensions are certainly incredibly high in the region, and Iran has vowed to retaliate. But they'll have to, it's incredibly important at this stage to find who's responsible, isn't it? Just how difficult is it to find, to get to the bottom of such an attack?
Well, it's very hard. I think they are now in, they are trying their best to find who did it, and then to link it to basically who supported it from abroad. I mean, depending on who has supported this bombing, I think Iran's response will differ. If it's ISIS, I think Iran will go after its leadership in different places in the region: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, on the Syrian-Iraqi border. That's, I think, has been the case previously and will be the case moving forward. But if it's Israel, and I here differ a bit, I don't completely rule out the Israeli possibility here, because in Lebanon in the 80s, Ronen Bergman speaks about this in his book. The Israelis have supported parties that committed such crimes within Lebanon. So you couldn't really rule it out, though I agree it's a low possibility, because the attack seems to be very much reminiscent of what ISIS usually has been doing in recent years. But you can't rule it out as well, the Israeli possibility. So if it's Israel, I think that's another issue. The Iranian response should be calibrated in a way to deter not only Israel, but its backer, the main fish in Iran's strategic and conduct in the region, that is the United States, to deter both. And that's, I think, is a very complicated and a very sophisticated thing to pull off, because what's at stake is not only Iran's internal stability in that case, it's Iran's deterrence. And deterrence in simple terms is basically, backing what the conditional threats by power projection. If Iran doesn't respond, that power projection and that conditional threat collapse, and ergo Iran's deterrence will collapse. So I think the Iranians will find it hard not to respond in one way or another to deter.
Absolutely. Mr. Fathullah-Nejad, you touched there on, some of the problems between the Iranian state and society. Fighters from, there are various groups in Iran itself. There's the fighters from Baluchistan. There are the, ethnic Arab separatists. They have staged attacks in Iran in the past. Would they have an interest, do you think, in carrying out such an attack?
Well, again, based on past experience, not only over the last few years, but over the last 4 decades, I think we have to be extremely cautious about, about naming all those possible perpetrators. It could well be that the groups that have been mentioned so far have been the perpetrator of this attack, but also, given past experience, could well be that it is a kind of inside job. Because there is a long history of such inside jobs from the very start of the Islamic Revolution to just a few years ago. Remember the RGC shooting down a Ukrainian passenger jet and saying that actually it was not the RGC. So there's a long history. And I think in all of that, the context is much more important here.
But when you say, Mr. Fathullah-Nejad, when you say an inside job, can you explain exactly what you mean there?
Sure. So I think, if you talk about this possibility, the context is important. The context is that the Islamic Republic, despite the appearance of being very strong and very stable from the outside, has a lot of problems, both at home but also in terms of foreign policy. Most importantly, Iran is going to have double elections in March for the parliament, but also the Assembly of Experts, who is going to select the next supreme leader. So there is a lot of complications about those two, but also there is a regime realization about the lack of social mobilization and voter turnout, and the repetition of historically low voter turnout this time around as well. So this, this attack, whoever might be the perpetrator, I think may be used by the Iranian state to further securitize the domestic arena, also in view of the domestic woes that I just explained against the backdrop of an still existing very profound economic crisis.
Yeah, so you're saying that the Iranian government might have something to gain, it sounds like, from this attack. But when you say inside job, are you implying that elements within the regime itself could have carried out such an attack?
Yeah, because I mean, you have to look at it very soberly. You have to look at you have to consider past experience with those attacks. We have never known for sure who have been the perpetrators. There have been multiple so-called terrorist attacks in Iran over the last few years, many of which have been blamed on Daesh. Many of which have been blamed on the other usual suspects, but also some of which have turned out to be, at the hands of the Iranian state as well. So I think.
Okay, I want to bring the other guests in here because I can see that both of them have something to say about it. Mr. Ahmadian, I will come to you in just a moment, but if I can get to Mr. Al-Tamimi, I know that you have said it's as unlikely that Iran carried out this attack as Israel. So what's your response to what you're hearing there?
Yes, I don't buy the idea that it was an Iranian inside job. I mean, just the timing of it and the number of people who were killed and so indiscriminate. And in regards actually to one of the other guests referenced the shooting down an airliner, I don't think that the Iranians intentionally did that. They did that and then they tried to cover up their mistake by saying they didn't do it.
Reported that it was intentional, but yeah.
Yeah, you don't think it was intentional. Okay. So again, I don't think you can say that for certain yet the Islamic State did it until either a statement comes out or an investigation happens, although it just seems that it has the hallmarks of it. But it seems much more like that than an Iranian inside job. So I'm skeptical of that line.
Okay. Mr. Fathullah-Nejad, if I can come back to you and look at the symbolism behind the attack itself. You know, what is the message behind attacking the tomb of a man who was a chief architect of Iranian policy across the region? You know, he was the commander of the Revolutionary Guard's overseas armed Quds force, overseeing fighters in Iraq and Syria and in Lebanon and Yemen.
I mean, to clarify my previous point, I'm not definitely suggesting that it was an inside job, but I'm just, basing my argument on past experience, which have shown a very mixed picture about the wide range of possibilities behind terrorist attacks in Iran. And currently the situation for the regime is much more dire. I explained briefly the domestic situation, but also regionally, the Islamic Republic has been, seeing severe blows with the killing of a top IRGC commander in Syria, but also the killing of Aruri in Beirut. So I think it's at least a welcome, a diversion from the regime that such an attack has now happened. When it comes to Soleimani, I think there's a lot of myth about, the status that he holds within Iranian society. There is certainly there has been a period in which many Iranians believe that he was a national hero, but I think this kind of picture is much more contested over the last few years in Iran. Also, given an extreme, wide gulf that has now evolved between the bulk of Iranian society and the regime on the other hand.
All right, Mr. Ahmadian, I know that you wanted to come in earlier when we were talking about, Mr. Fathullah-Nejad said that while he's not implying that elements within the Iranian regime itself could have carried out this attack, that certainly it might have something to gain from it. It might be a welcome distraction given the immense pressures it's under internally and from international groups as well.
Well, I differ with that view because I think Iran, at this point, more than ever, it needs its deterrence vis-à-vis Israel and the United States, given the escalation in the region. It can't do what Mr. Fathullah-Nejad is describing to say, well, securitize the internal, because the Iranians, the Islamic Republic's main legacy is that it kept Iran stable in a region in turmoil. Now, a security breach a breach on this scale is a blow to that narrative. How can that be the case? I think that's Iran, I mean, the Islamic Republic has a lot to lose more than it can gain from such an incident. So I think that's, I mean, the Iranian opposition usually talks about such incidents being internal jobs. Well, and the only incident is the airplane that they were late to declared responsibility, and that was an incident. Now, this can't be an incident. It's a bomb implanted in the crowd that were commemorating the Quds Force assassinated, very celebrated hero in the Iranian nation, and people were going there to take part in that. And these people are the social base of the Islamic Republic. Islamic Republic. I mean, for the sake of the argument, the Islamic Republic, even if it does so, which I didn't see any evidence in that, it wouldn't hit its own base.
All right. What about other groups, Mr. Al-Tamimi? Sorry, Mr. Fatullah Nejad, I can see you wanting to come in here.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, to clarify the record about the RGC shooting down of the Ukrainian fighter jet, according to Canadian court rulings, this was probably an intentional attack. So there is, in fact, a long history. I mean, Cinema Rex, I mentioned at the very beginning of the revolution, and also, later on. So this is not, some fantasy here. And in terms of deterrence, yes, deterrence is important, but also what is part of the Iranian national security doctrine somehow, also the Islamic Republic's security doctrine, is the need for crises. A crisis can also be very useful and can be instrumentalized by the state for regime stability purposes. So this context also may be...
All right. Okay, Mr. Al-Tamimi, let me bring you in here. There's some disagreement because the attack was on Qasem Soleimani's, around his tomb. Let me bring you in here because there's a difference of views on his legacy. Mr. Fatullah Nejad is saying that he's not the hero that he was painted to be. What do you make of that? And the groups, again, the groups that would be interested in carrying out an attack on the 4th anniversary of his assassination?
Yes. In regard to Qasem Soleimani's legacy, it really depends who you ask in the region. So, I mean, for people, say, in Iraq's Hashid, who are close to Iran, they see him as this hero who was important in the fight against the Islamic State, and also pro-Iranian elements in Syria as well think very highly of him, are very proud to, for example, to have appeared in photos with him in operations, either in the Syrian desert or in Aleppo, for example. But then there are others who see him from a more sectarian angle as a persecutor of Sunnis and responsible for mass killing of Sunnis, whether in Syria or whether in Iraq, and also a symbol of Iran's government. And so there are certainly other groups that, say, for example, play up narratives about Sunni persecution in Iran, like Jaish al-Adl, and also there's a movement based in Syria of Iranian Sunni exiles, as it were, who've come to Syria and joined the insurgency there and put out a statement about persecution of Sunnis in Iran. So they could also have an interest in doing some kind of symbolic attack that attacks the hometown of Qasem Soleimani.
Okay.
But not on this indiscriminate scale, I don't think.
All right. We don't have very long left in the program, so I'd like to ask each of you a final question. Mr. Ahmadian, do you think, how much has this attack increased the chance of a wider escalation of violence in the region, would you say?
Well, I think it comes in a time of regional escalation already, and that's what points the finger at Israel, and it's possible backing of such an incident, though, as I said, it's reminiscent of what ISIS used to do, but the possibility of being being backed, or another group being backed by Israel, is still there, and that will open the door wide to regional escalation, because if Iran doesn't respond, it's credibility and its deterrence will be at stake.
Yeah.
And if it responds, and I think it will, if it comes to a conclusion that Israel is behind it, then we will see more escalation in the region. I think this will be a regional response, and the Israelis will try to drag the United States and pitch it against Iran or possibly other countries to try to put more pressure on Iran.
Yeah, Mr. Fathullah, do you think that Israel is trying to drag the United States into a wider regional conflict with Iran?
If Israel is trying to get into the United States into, I think, on your first question, despite the fact that Tehran claims that there is a link between the two, that is the Kerman explosions and the war in Gaza, that it is basically an act of desperation carried out by Israel and the United States because of the complications of the war. I think that those are two distinct arenas here. Iran is not suicidal. It's not a suicidal regime, and also the kind of hard revenge that Iran had promised after the U.S. drone killing of Soleimani never materialized. So the same caution can be observed within the war in Gaza. So neither Iran nor Hezbollah are interested in a great war with Israel and or the United States might jeopardize regime survival.
And very quickly, Mr. Al-Tamimi, how do you see this incident playing out over the next days and weeks?
Really depends on who. It really depends on whom the Iranians hold responsible. If they hold the Islamic State responsible and the Islamic State claims it or whatever, then I think then that doesn't change the wider regional picture of tension escalation of the Gaza war, but it's a separate dynamic. But then if they blame Israel, I expect some kind of maybe calibrated response, but not necessarily attempt to go all out to war with Israel and provoke a wider regional war. So.
Which will be why we're all looking at that Iranian investigation into what happened so closely. All right, that is Hassan Ahmadian in Tehran, Ali Fathullah in Berlin, and Ayman Jawad Al-Tamimi in Bethlehem. Thank you all very much. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Elizabeth Puranam, and the entire team here, bye for now.